Random House Audio presents How We Die, Reflections on Life's Final Chapter by Sherwin B. Nuland. Read for you by the author.
How We Die. Everyone wants to know the details of dying, though few of us are willing to say so. Whether to anticipate the events of our own final illness or better to comprehend what is happening to a mortally stricken loved one, or, more likely, out of that id-born fascination with death we all share, we are lured by thoughts of life's ending. To most people, death remains a hidden secret, as eroticized as it is feared. We are irresistibly attracted by the very anxieties we find most terrifying. We are drawn to them by a primitive excitement that arises from flirtation with danger. Moths and flames, mankind and death, there is little difference. None of us seems psychologically able to cope with the thought of our own state of death, with the idea of a permanent unconsciousness in which there is neither void nor vacuum, in which there is simply nothing. It seems so different from the nothing that preceded life. As with every other looming terror and looming temptation, we seek ways to deny the power of death and the icy hold in which it grips human thought. Its constant closeness has always inspired traditional methods by which we consciously and unconsciously disguise its reality, such as folk tales, allegories, dreams, and even jokes. In recent generations, we've added something new. We've created the method of modern dying. Modern dying takes place in the modern hospital, where it can be hidden, cleansed of its organic blight, and finally packaged for modern burial. We now deny the power not only of death, but of nature itself. We hide our faces from its face, but still we spread our fingers just a bit, because there is something in us that cannot resist a peek. We compose scenarios that we yearn to see enacted by our mortally ill beloved, and the performances are successful just often enough to sustain our expectations. Faith in the possibility of such a scenario has ever been a tradition of Western societies, which in centuries past valued a good death as the salvation of the soul and an uplifting experience for friends and family, and celebrated it in the literature and pictorial representations of ars moriendi, the art of dying. Originally, ars moriendi was a religious and spiritual endeavor described by the 15th century printer William Caxton as the craft for to die for the health of man's soul. In time, it evolved into the concept of the beautiful death, truly the correct way to die. But ars moriendi is nowadays made difficult by the very fact of our attempts at concealing and sanitizing, and especially preventing, which result in the kinds of deathbed scenes that occur in such specialized hiding places as intensive care units, oncology research facilities, and emergency rooms. The good death has increasingly become a myth. Actually, it has always been a myth for the most part, but never nearly as much as today. The chief ingredient of the myth is the longed-for ideal of what we call death with dignity. Not long ago, I saw in my clinical office a 43-year-old attorney on whom I had operated for an early-stage breast cancer 3 years before. Although she was free of disease and had every expectation of permanent cure, she seemed oddly upset that day. At the end of the visit, she asked if she might stay a bit longer to talk. She then began to describe the recent death in another city of her mother from the same disease of which she herself had almost certainly been cured. "My mother died in agony," she said, "and no matter how hard the doctors tried, they couldn't make things easy for her. It was nothing like the peaceful end I expected. I thought it would be spiritual, that we would talk about her life, about the two of us together. But it never happened. There was too much pain, too much Demerol." And then, in an outburst of tearful rage, she said, "Dr. Nuland, there was no dignity in my mother's death." My patient needed a great deal of reassurance that there had been nothing unusual about the way her mother died, that she had not done something wrong to prevent her mother from experiencing that spiritual death with dignity that she had anticipated. All of her efforts and expectations had been in vain, and now this very intelligent woman was in despair. I tried to make clear to her that the belief in the probability of death with dignity is our and society's attempt to deal with the reality of what is all too frequently a series of destructive events that involve by their very nature the disintegration of the dying person's humanity. I have not often seen much dignity in the process by which we die. The quest to achieve true dignity fails when our bodies fail. Occasionally, very occasionally, unique circumstances of death will be granted to someone with a unique personality, and that lucky combination will make it happen. But such a confluence of fortune is uncommon, and in any case not to be expected by any but a very few people. I have written this book to demythologize the process of dying. My intention is not to depict it as a horror-filled sequence of painful and disgusting degradations, but to present it in its biological and clinical reality as seen by those who are witness to it and felt by those who experience it. Only by a frank discussion of the very details of dying can we best deal with those aspects that frighten us most. It is by knowing the truth and being prepared for it that we rid ourselves of that fear of the terra incognita, the unknown land of death that leads to self-deception and disillusions. My mother died of colon cancer 1 week after my 11th birthday, and that fact has shaped my life. All that I have become and much that I have not become I trace directly or indirectly to her death. When I began working on this book, my brother had been dead just a little more than a year, also of colon cancer. In my professional and personal life, I have lived with the awareness of death's imminence for more than half a century, and labored in its constant presence for all but the first decade of that time. This is the book in which I will try to tell what I have learned. Every life is different from any that has gone before it, and so is every death. The uniqueness of each of us extends even to the way we die. Though most people know that various diseases carry us to our final hours by various paths, only very few comprehend the fullness of that endless multitude of ways by which the final forces of the human spirit can separate themselves from the body. Every one of death's diverse appearances is as distinctive as that singular face we each show the world during the days of life. Every man will yield up the ghost in a manner that the heavens have never known before. Every woman will go her final way in her own way. The first time in my professional career that I saw death's remorseless eyes, they were fixed on a 52-year-old man lying in seeming comfort between the crisp sheets of a freshly made-up bed in a private room at a large university teaching hospital. I had just begun my 3rd year of medical school, and it was my unsettling lot to encounter death in my very first patient at the same hour. James McCarty was a powerfully built construction executive whose business success had seduced him into patterns of living that we now know are suicidal. But the events of his illness took place almost 40 years ago, and we understood a great deal less about the dangers of the good life. When smoking, red meat, and great slabs of bacon, butter, and belly were thought to be the risk-free rewards of achievement, he had let himself become flabby and sedentary as well. Whereas he had once directed on-site the crews of his thriving construction company, he was now content to lead imperiously from behind a desk. McCarty delivered his pronouncements most of the day from a comfortable swivel chair that provided him an unobstructed view of the New Haven Green and the Quinnipiac Club, his favorite grill room for midday executive gluttony. The events of McCarty's hospitalization are easily recalled because the startling staccato with which they burst forth instantly and permanently imprinted them in my mind. I have never forgotten what I saw and did that night. McCarty arrived in the hospital's emergency room at about 8 p.m. on a hot and humid evening in early September, complaining of a constricting pressure behind his breastbone that seemed to radiate up into his throat and down his left arm. The pressure.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?